This is part one of the Tamiya Avante 2011 build series. This is different from the 2011 Black Special, which is sitting right there. I already have a build series on that chassis. This is for the standard 2011 model. It has different differentials and different tires, but it's largely the same chassis. And I would like to go over some different elements of the build, things that I didn't go over in the Black Special build. So before I get into what I have put together so far, I'll just briefly go over some of the stuff I have here. This is the RC screws kit for the original Tamiya Avante. These screws are, same size and everything that you would use in the 2011 build. So I decided to use these for this build. In the 2011 Black Special video, I used the hex head screw set. Both screw sets are very nice. They're reasonably priced. This one comes with a nice container, which the hex head screw set does not. But the downside is that they are not labeled, so you just need a set of calipers or something like this guy here, just to make sure you measure the screws and have the right sizes for everything. Not every screw that you'll use to build this chassis is in this kit. There are some unique screws, like for example, these screws here on either side. Those hold in the body clip that eventually goes, that holds down the under tray. Okay, so that doesn't come with this. And there are a few other screws throughout the build that these don't come with, but these are just standard hex head screws. They're very nice. Anyway, moving on. The 2011 comes with the sort of standard steering bell crank set, so I picked up the racing steering set. This comes with the Black Special. I liked it when I built it on the Black Special. It has very little slop, so I figured I would get it for this. I also have the Yeah Racing aluminum front and rear hub carriers. So these are the front hub carriers / steering knuckles, and these are the rear hub carriers here. In the stock kit for both the Black Special and the standard 2011, these are plastic, and they were supposedly prone to breaking, so I picked up the aluminum ones. They're like 20 to 25 bucks per pair, so that's not so bad. Here I just have all of the spare screws and parts and everything from the Black Special build, like this anti-wear grease, for example. You don't go through all of it in the build, so I'll just be reusing some of this stuff for this build. This anti-wear grease is very thick viscosity, and you use it when you're screwing on metal screws into metal posts. So for example, on the rear gearbox here, there are these 3 metal posts that slot into these little housings here in the gearbox, and the screws, you put some of this anti-wear grease onto the screw thread and you screw it in, and the grease is so thick it's almost like a thread lock. Not exactly, but it just helps hold everything in place. Let's see. So I guess I'll get to what's going on here. For the carbon fiber upper and lower decks, of course, I prepared these early, so you sand around the edges here and you coat them with some CA. I just used Gorilla Glue. It works just fine. When you sand it, you don't just want to sand the top surface here, you also want to sand a little bit of the corners to try to round it off. It just keeps you from maybe slicing your finger or something if you run your finger across it. When the glue dries, it does give off a vapor and it can leave behind some white residue, but you can easily wipe that off. It's not a permanent stain. So you start with the rear gearbox. You actually start with this plate here that the motor eventually mounts onto. That goes onto the bottom half of the rear gearbox. And then this motor I'm just using as a placeholder. I ordered a brushless system. I'm just waiting for it to come in the mail. So when that comes in, I'll replace this. But in any case, there's another plate here that mounts to the motor. I'll just show you in the manual here. That's this plate, okay? And then that mounts onto this plate here. And there's just 2 screws for that. There's 1 screw at the bottom, 1 screw up here. This has a little slot in it, so you just loosen these up and you can rotate this back and forth to set your gear mesh. Okay, the differential for both the front and rear goes in from the bottom, so you put the bottom in, and then there's a little cap that goes on. Same thing eventually for the front. Now when you put the first part of the front gearbox together, it's actually two halves. So there's, oops, sorry about that. There's one half here and one half here, and then there's a little brace on this side. There's also a brace on the other side. It's this plastic bit here. Okay. Now within this brace, you have a bearing that goes into this side and a bearing that goes into this side, and then this guy, which keeps falling out, you put in on this side to hold this this bevel gear in. The thing is, you do this relatively early on in the process, so after you do the motor there, you put in this half here, put the gear in, but then you have to mount it to the gearbox. Okay, fine. So you put this drive shaft in, or this to hold the gear in, but then you kind of have to hold it in place as you're holding the chassis this way to get some levers to put these screws in. So it occasionally falls out. So that's just something to note, but not a big deal. So this is where the build is right now. The next step in the build are the rather interesting gear diffs. So hopefully the next video will actually be during or right after I build these diffs, because they're kind of interesting. I'd like to go over them a little bit. A couple other things to go over as far as the packaging and everything. The ball bearings come in this sort of nice little plastic container, and that's part of the blister pack here. The blister pack shows up on this side, the bearings go in here. And just like with the 2011 Black Special build, I use the same trick where I just take a razor blade and I just cut out each of the bubbles to get to the parts I need. One thing that I will note about this chassis compared to the Black Special is, first off, as you probably know, the tires. Let me see if I can get a better view here. So the tires are a different tread, okay, and they're the same width and diameter front and rear. The Black Special have more, I mean, this is slightly a two-step tread, but the Black Special has a more obvious two-step kind of pin pattern. The rubber compound feels comparable. It's a pretty hard rubber, okay, but what stands out is here they give you foam inserts, and for the Black Special it did not come with any foam inserts, so it's just tire and air and then wheel. So here you get this. Should make the tires a little more squishy, a little more compliant, I guess. And of course you get your cam lock wheels, the classical Avante cam lock wheels, and the standard set of wheels for more modern tires. Let's see. That's the speed control that comes with it. This is, I'm not going to use this, of course. Piece of crap. But, you know, body, decals, everything. So in time, this will be all put together, but I wanted to get started on this. I had this box for a while, and I've just been going racing every weekend, so I haven't had a chance to really start building it. Few things to note about the Black Special, or rather one thing in particular, now that I have this guy out. So when I talked about this chassis, I think it was in the part 6 or part 7 video, I was talking about the suspension and the rear being a little bit soft and the front being a little stiff. So all I really did was to, because I originally had some shock collars in the front here, I just took those out, put them on the rear, so the rear rebounds a little bit better, front's a tad softer. It's still, the front is rather underdamped for the stock shock oil. The rear is okay now. It's not perfect. And the other thing, of course, that I'd like to mention here for both chassis, really, because they're the same design, is that in the Avante type of chassis, most of your weight is in the rear. If you compare that to something like a B44 or Kyosho Laser, the weight distribution is actually a little bit more towards the front in those chassis, because the motor's in the front, your speed control, your receiver, your servo, all in the front. So a chassis like this won't compete very well if you actually take it racing, because the front is relatively light. It's going to understeer a lot. But of course, it looks nice. So they're a lot of fun to build. And I was also thinking about these guys here, these little turnbuckles. You have these two ball joints on either side, and there's just a screw in the middle here. I had been debating about whether I want to maybe put some thread lock on these nuts on either side, so that once the thread locks lock in, you can just maybe screw it in or out to adjust your camber. But I actually don't quite remember if that would work. It depends on the direction of the way the threads go in, but you may be able to do that. I'll play around with that later. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. So this is so far what I have, and I'll be making another video soon.